Yeah. Uh, uh. Pocket full of money, swisher loaded with gas. Celebration in order, you're now watching a class. Pocket full of money, swisher loaded with gas. Celebration in order, you're now watching a class. Pocket.
11th, 1973, a culture was born. This culture was called hip hop. Hip hop is a derivative of every other musical genre there is. There's elements of rock within hip hop, gospel, jazz, blues, little bit of every genre absorbs and creates and forms the culture we know as hip hop. In the beginning, it was the DJ. The DJ, like Kool Herc. Kool Herc was one of the beginning stages of hip hop, which was the DJ. The DJ would play music in the park. People would gather, listen to the music. Eventually, it would go to clubs. But for the most part, in the early days, it was the parks, the block parties. There were no rap records to play in the early going because rappers wasn't making records. Matter of fact, it wasn't even rappers at first. It was just DJs and the party. The DJ would play records. A lot of those records would probably be found in their parents' collection. Nonetheless, those were the records that were getting played. Sometimes, some DJs got a hold of what they call the 12-inch. Some of these records had break beats in them. DJs would spin and play the break beats. Dancers would dance over those breaks. Those guys end up becoming break dancers. It's important to know that the elements of hip hop culture, DJing, graffiti art, break dancing, the fashion, and the knowledge, as well as the MC. Eventually, it became MCs on the microphone at the block parties. And that's how MCs would build their name and their reputation by rapping at every block party. There was no money involved in hip hop at this point. There was no social media. It was just people doing it for fun. DJs playing their music for fun, just to see the reaction of the people. People coming out, dancing, chilling, celebrating, mingling. That's what it was about. Then came 1979. And a rap artist by the name of Curtis Blow was the first rap artist to get a record deal with Mercury Records. Now, of course, this move changed the playing field now because, up until Curtis Blow, everything was just for fun. I believe that when Curtis Blow got signed, it made a lot of people say, whoa, wait a minute. You get signed to a record deal now? and you could actually make some money off of it. Because that was 1979. The number of rappers signed to record deals would multiply within the next decade. It would multiply on the East Coast, as far as New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and even spread to California, as well as Texas, Miami, Florida, a few other places in the world at the same time. Rap in the 80s, when you talk about the start of the 80s, because music was already in this weird space anyway, so to speak. You had the remnants of disco. You had R&B. You had jazz. You had rock and roll. But then here comes hip hop, this new young genre of music. I remember at the start of MTV was a rock station. They only played rock and roll videos. And truthfully, at the time MTV started, it was maybe only one rap video that was out, to be honest with you. And that was Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight, a world-renowned hip-hop record. The first big breakout rap single. World-renowned, everybody knows that record. You know what I'm saying? It has been talked about from everyone, because everyone knows it. You know what I'm saying? It's dare I say, is one of hip hop's most memorable anthems. That's a fair assessment. The start of the 80s, you saw a lot of things happening with rap music. Like I said, Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight, that was rap's first big breakout single. But you was also starting to see the commercial acceptance of hip hop through corporate entities. Also, Hollywood interest in hip hop music, because within the 80s alone, you had movies such as Beat Street, Crush Groove, Breaking 2, Rapping, Wild Style, Style Wars, Tougher Than Leather, Disorderlies. All these movies had hip hop in them. All these movies had rappers in them. And to say that the culture was only 10, maybe 10 years old when all these films started coming out, or a little bit more than 10 years old, that says a lot. 1985 was the year that major labels, major corporations took an interest into hip hop. Because before that, it was just mom and pop independent labels putting out their music. If they sell it, they sell it. If they don't, they don't. No major backing. Well, in 85, once they seen the success and how much they could make off of hip hop, they bought in. They bought in and they started signing anybody they could. And there was a bunch of them. And that's why I say the number of artists signed to record deals in the 80s multiplied. It multiplied all over New York City, New Jersey, Philadelphia, California, Texas, Florida, all over. It was all kinds of artists getting deals in the 80s. And rap was like a new commodity to some people. It was still feared by white people. But white people did not get it. They did not understand it. They were not listening to it. It was not being played in their establishments. A lot of radio stations, certain radio stations would not play it. Then you had some that would. Back then, it wasn't a lot of rappers for you to say you didn't like rap. It's either you liked it or you didn't, because it wasn't that many for you to pick from to say, well, I don't like him, but he's cool. It wasn't like that. Back then, if you like rap, you like rap. And, but it was only listened to by the young kids. I didn't really see people of age listening to it. Maybe until the late 80s. There was the commercialization of hip hop. There was the Hollywood acceptance side of hip hop. And then you started to see the subgenres of hip hop. Also, the golden era took place in the 80s. A lot of people will say the golden era is 86 through 88. I will say that the golden era is 86 through 99, respectively. That's me, but then you started to see the subgenres of hip hop started to emerge. You had Public Enemy, who represented the pro-black militant hip hop. You had Heavy D and the Boys and Kid and Play. Some people would define that as happy rap. Some people would define it as party rap, positive rap. Then you had NWA, which a lot of people would label as reality rap. The media labeled it as gangster rap, and it became a big news story. And I'll never forget watching that on the news. And what they did was, they thought that they was going to scare people away from listening to the music, which actually all they did was gave them free publicity and helped their album sell more. Because, when you're on tour or when you have an album that the radio refused to play any of your records, their records was not being played on radio. They had a video, which was not a brutal or obscene video. It was just a regular video, but it was banned. And then, now they're getting publicity on the news for one record on their album. And that helped them sell millions of records and helped blow that subgenre up. It's interesting now that I'm older and I'm looking back on the journey of hip hop. It's interesting when you go back and you remember how times were. You remember, I remember at first, in the early goings of rap, a lot of rappers were not using profanity. A lot of rappers were not cursing. I can remember certain people on the East Coast not liking artists who use profanity in their music. This was the early goings of hip hop. This was probably the early 80s, maybe the first 3 to 4 years of the 80s. But then that changed, because then all of a sudden it became, what rapper is not using explicit lyrics in their music? Because you could go in a record store and pick up several different albums, and each one of them had a parental guidance sticker on it. The parental guidance sticker was a warning label for anyone purchasing the record to know that this album contains adult content, adult themes, certain type of language, yada yada. What was interesting about that time was they was actually trying to ban rap, like the reality rap that they labeled gangster rap. They were trying to ban it, and they were trying to use that parental guidance sticker to do it. They were trying to, I guess, detour a certain audience from not listening to it. But all that attention and all those news stories and all that publicizing the artist, it only made the sales go up. So it was only, it only benefited in the end because you can't buy that type of publicity when you're on the news. And for some artists, some of them was probably in the news more than they were on the radio, but it helped them out in their career. And then there was the acceptance of hip hop as far as, with the Grammys. A lot of people don't realize that the Grammys did not want to accept rap as a genre of music and give it a category at the Grammys. The first year that they decided that they would add the rap category, they decided not to televise the rap category as a part of the Grammy show that year. That was 1989. And instead of, I guess the artists did all the rap artists who were nominated that year for a Grammy, instead of going to the Grammys, they went to a party thrown by Fab Five Freddy, who held a party in honor of the Grammy nominees in the rap category. And it's important to note that DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince were the first hip hop act to win a Grammy. But hip hop never really cared about the Grammys because the Grammys never really cared about hip hop. They never wanted to accept hip hop as a category in the first place. Some of their moves are made because they missed out on opportunities to give artists their flowers when they should have. For instance, infamously, Kendrick Lamar's first album was passed up and the award was given to another artist who we never heard from again. Maybe 2 years later, the Grammys give him a Grammy for, I believe it was To Pimp a Butterfly. And that's because they were supposed to give him one for his first album, but they missed out. They're always a step or two behind the culture if you pay attention to the Grammys. But all of this took place in the 80s. So you have the commercialization, the Hollywood acceptance, the acceptance from award shows, American Music Awards, the Grammys, all across the board. And then that takes us to possibly the best decade in hip hop history. And that would be the 1990s. What could I say about the 90s, man? The 90s was a special time, man. It was that 10-year period was a very special time. A lot of things took place during that 10-year period. Wow. It's incredible that 10-year era, that period is still being discussed today. is still being talked about. A lot of that music is still being played today because it's timeless. We are at the start of the 1990s. As the 80s ended, you had the commercialization of rap building. You had the Hollywood acceptance part. And also you had the advent of shows such as Yo MTV Raps and Rap City, which brought rap into households, into the 1990s, possibly the most important decade of hip hop history. In the 90s, it should be noted that there was a meeting in 1991 where industry executives found out that the labels and corporations were in bed with private prison corporations, and they had planned to do away with positive messages within rap and showcase nothing but gangster rap to fill its prison system. In that same year, 1991, NWA Niggas for Life became the first hardcore gangster rap album to go #1 on Billboard. And SoundScan was also created that year. At the same time, you still had Public Enemy, you still had Heavy D, you had A Tribe Called Quest, Queen Latifah, MC Lyte. Rap was still very much a mixed bag because everybody was not doing the same thing. True, gangster rap did become popular. There was a lot of people who bought into it because of the success and the money that it brought. Some people fabricated their life and pretended to fit the gangster mold, which is why the term studio gangster came about. The movies didn't stop. Rappers started going into sitcoms such as The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You see rappers on sitcoms such as Martin and Living Single, among other shows. The sales of rap increased. Gangster rap would run its course for about 5 or 6 years. You still had lyrical rap, happy rap, female rap, different subgenres and sectors. In the early 90s, a lot of the East Coast stars from the 80s began to backslide, which New York at one point needed some new blood to come through. The first strike was Onyx in 93. And then came Wu-Tang Clan in late 93. And then 94 came, where we saw the introduction of Nas with Illmatic. We saw the introduction of the Notorious B.I.G. was Ready to Die. Also, the South was bubbling the entire time, because the start of the 90s, we were jamming a group called UGK. By 92, UGK was signed with Jive Records. We were jamming 8-Ball and MJG, who dropped their first project in 93. Outkast released their debut album in 1994. Goody Mob released their debut in 1995. Also, another subculture that was bubbling in the 90s was DJ Screw and the Screwed Up Clique. DJ Screw was a DJ who slowed down music at a third of the speed, and he used to make what on the East Coast would be considered mixtapes, but they were called screw tapes. They were on gray cassettes. And at one point, you could personalize your cassette if you knew all the songs that you wanted, bring it to his house, and he would hook it up for you. Also, he gave way to a lot of artists who started off freestyling on those screw tapes and went on to achieve great success in the music industry. The screwed up clique includes Lil Keke, Big Pokey, Big Mo, Fat Pat, Hawk, Mike D, Zero, Lil Flip, and a host of others who don't rap. The first time I heard Screw was 94. I didn't get it. At first, I thought the radio was messed up. I used to ask the partner, what's wrong with your radio? And he was like, nah, it go like that. And I can remember at first my reaction was like most people, okay. You know what I'm saying? Not too much, but I would say within a year, it became major in the streets of Texas, you know. And then also, you know, I'd be, you know, negligent to leave out the rivalry that occurred in the 90s. A lot of people still talk about this rivalry to this day. It's the East Coast, West Coast rivalry. Basically, this was the beef that changed the course of hip hop history because publications, news, magazines, they got behind this thing and they put gasoline on the fire. And we all know how it ended. Two of hip hop's biggest stars were murdered within 6 months of each other. And unfortunately, both of those murders are still unsolved. But this changed the course of hip hop history. It etched two men named in stone as legends because both of them died in their prime. Everybody in hip hop wonders if those two artists would have stayed alive, where would the game be today? It's probably one of hip hop's greatest what ifs. I need to make note that Eric Eazy-E Wright was the first hip hop star to pass away from full-blown AIDS, which was in 1995. Tupac Shakur was the first major rap superstar. Tupac Shakur and Notorious B.I.G. were two major rap superstars in their prime who were murdered publicly. After that, the West Coast kind of fell on hard times in terms of sound and music. The East Coast rejuvenated itself with new blood, like DMX and Big Pun. Then you had the South, where you had Rap-A-Lot Records, you had Luke, you had DJ Screw and the Screwed Up Clique. You had 8-Ball and MJG and Suave House Records. Dungeon Family. Underground Kings. You had a bunch of Southern artists who were putting it down at the time, including somebody who I had heard way back in 1994. He's from New Orleans. And his name was Master P. Master P proved to be the smartest businessman hip hop has ever seen. And this is why. Master P was consistent with his music releases. And he got himself a lawyer, the same lawyer who worked for Michael Jackson. And that lawyer said, when you negotiate a deal, these are the terms you need to have your deal under. So Master P negotiated a deal for his No Limit Records. And the deal was unprecedented. Master P got 85% of the proceeds, and he gave Priority 15%. Within 1 year alone, Master P sold 75 million albums. And at the start of the year, he was releasing albums a month apart. By the end of 1998, he was dropping an album every week. He was very, very consistent. He understood business. He understood the market. He understood to strike when you're hot. And he made a lot of bread doing it. He made Forbes lists. He made the cover with Russell Simmons and I believe it was Sean Combs. I believe it was. But Master P was one of the smartest, if not the smartest businessman hip hop had seen. And that happened in the 90s. And after the industry realized what Master P had done, they said that they will never let another Master P happen again. The 90s for a lot of people were dangerous. The 90s for me was good. I mean, it was so cool. It was the era of pagers, the era of house parties, you know, and not every party ended with violence. Sometimes there was a fight. Can't deny that. But most of the times, man, we had a good time. I can't front. Most of the time, the music, you know what I'm saying? The music was everything. The music was great. I mean, every year of the 90s produced classic rap albums. Every year. The business of rap turned from being $1 million business to $1 billion business, which raised the stakes for rap music. By the end of the 90s, rappers were selling what country and rock artists used to sell in the late 80s and early 90s. The business of rap was booming. And what would the future hold? Unfortunately, as we continue and progress in our hip hop conversation, once we get to the 2000s, we get to a point to where the money streams increase, the visibility increase, and the quality goes down. The quality goes from sugar to shit within the course of the next 10 years. When the 90s was over, essentially, the golden era of rap had ended. Because when 2000 started, rap started to feel not so good as it used to. credit, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. From 2000 to 2007, there were still noteworthy, good, and classic albums coming out during that time frame. The quality of rap overall was just starting to slide downhill. I remember this was in the time frame that I was started selling music myself. And I could remember listening to everything that was coming out at the time, rap or R&B. And to me, in the early 2000s, R&B was in a better shape than rap was. In terms of sound, content, production, quality, value. That's just how I felt. But nonetheless, you still saw great hip hop moments happen. I mean, who could forget Jay-Z at Summer Jam 2001 dissing Nas, and that's what led to their beef, Takeover and Ether, which Nas won. A big moment in hip hop history that people still talk about. The introduction of the Clips by way of Pharrell Williams and the Neptunes. That was 2002. Or when Scarface became the president of Def Jam South, and he released an album under Def Jam called Fix, a classic body of work. That was 2002. Or when a young artist by the name of 50 Cent got signed to Shady Aftermath on the strength of a mixtape. That moment changed the course of hip hop. Because after that, every rapper in the world made mixtapes. That was 2002. Note that in 2003, Outkast and 50 Cent both sold 10 million records apiece. Yeah. That's probably the last time we saw that in hip hop. You know? Like I said, the business was booming. It started to become more money streams and more revenue avenues, if you will. Some artists and producers were keeping up with the quality of hip hop. Others let it fade and let it slide. There was an element of rap that was coming in that could be labeled as bubblegum or flimsy or phony. What was funny is 3 6 Mafia created crunk music. Crunk music was somehow stolen by people of Atlanta. Yet, crunk was the music that just kept on giving, because out of crunk came another genre called trap music. And this would be the sound that would dominate the next decade in hip hop.